Welcome to the Chris Spangle Show. Thanks for joining me. It's so great to be back with you here in the new year. Has anything happened in the last couple weeks since we've been off? We haven't invaded any countries, have we? Okay, too. The government's not invading people's homes without warrants, are they? Yeah, they are. Okay. Well, at least they're not shooting people in the face. Okay. Oh, they are. All right. Well, seems like there's a lot going on every single day. I'm just not going to argue all these different things, right? Like it's hard being a Venezuelan expert and the next day being an immigration expert and then the next day being a police action shooting expert and then the next day being a Greenland expert. It's hard, okay? I do it especially on Facebook and it's difficult and I need you to understand how hard it is for me. But that's not what we're going to talk about today, because I think when we get and this is I think a big problem with the Trump era is that we get, as people used to delete me off of Facebook over the last 20 years because I was too political. And I would say there's no such thing as too political, because take a look around in the room you're in and name one thing in that room where the government does not touch, between taxes, now tariffs, import rules, regulations. Your life is inherently political. And if you are not engaged in politics, then politics really benefits because you don't actually have a say. And so for instance, we just went through this whole deal in Indiana about redistricting, and only 34% of voting adults are Republicans in the state of Indiana. The biggest block is 37% of voters I think it was 37, are independent, are not voters. They don't vote at all. So if those people got engaged, things would probably look a lot different. And we'll talk in future episodes about why they don't. But we need to step back and kind of take a look at what government is. And I got a question in the We Are Libertarians Instagram that I thought was great. So I like a podcast called Holy Post. They make a lot of good arguments. They're biblically faithful. They're pastors trying to discern their way through politics and culture and everything. If you like this show, you'll probably like that podcast. And I don't remember what this was in response to, but someone wrote in and said, "Do you think there's a difference between me caring for someone personally versus how the law should be written or enforced? I agree with biblical foundations, but the government cannot extend mercy like I personally can, or people will take advantage of it. Thoughts?" I think this is a great question because the government has gotten too close where it feels like it's a personal entity, especially if you hate the government. Like if you hate the government, it's like a incarnate enemy. And I can't say words, but I think in the time that we're in, I think the ICE shooting is a great example. We get so sucked into the particulars of the story that we stop to step back and take a look at the broader questions of the story. We argue over, was it a good shoot or not? Was she trying to flee? Was he scared for his life? Like, we pick sides along those things and don't ask, why was ICE there to begin with? What power should the government have? What is the interaction between a government and its people, and what is legitimate or not? And then I think the thing that gets trampled on the most in human nature in general is the Imago Dei. Everything comes down to whether or not we're respecting other human beings as humans, because humans are different. My little 7-year-old, she came home, should say our 7-year-old came home and was asking questions about evolution. And look, I'm not going to explain. I don't even know. I like John Walton's explanation of Genesis 1 and evolution and how it all fits together. You can look that up. That's a different podcast. But that's too broad for her. And so really, it actually started with Martin Luther King Day. She came home the Friday before Martin Luther King Day and asked to watch some videos about Martin Luther King Jr. And so we found some and we watched some and we pulled up some speeches and played those. And she had kind of gotten the particulars in the school, but she didn't quite get all the particulars and didn't understand why he had to protest. And so I explained tried to explain systemic racism to a 7-year-old, how Southerners in the 60s and before had Jim Crow, and I didn't even get into all that detail, but it's like, it really boils down to people in the South, white people in the South, did not view black people as human beings. They denied their fundamental they were denied their dignity and liberty. And we as Christians believe that every person is inherently worth dignity, liberty, respect, because they're created in the image of God, which allowed us to move into talking about some of those questions of evolution, because she's like, well, we're no different than a snake or a rabbit, or we're just like an animal. I'm like, we're not an animal. Because at the end of the day, you and I are created in the image of God. We are stamped with a special set of circumstances that God has blessed us with and graced us with so that we can reason. We have it is like a foundational principle of Western society, which always is what's crazy about me, is watching like so many of these JD Vance right wingers and Curtis Yarvinites give up on the Imago Dei while saying they're defending Western civilization. It doesn't make any sense, because if you are Stephen Miller defending Western civilization and think anybody who's brown, let alone citizen or not, should be deported, which is exactly what's happening. And when you set a quota of 200 a month are going to be denaturalized and deported, and what's the criteria? Which people are being deported? You've decided that only white people, the Imago Dei only applies to white Catholics and Protestants. And that's not biblical. That's not Western civilization at all. And what is biblical and what is Western civilization is pluralism, where we embrace people who are even different than us and see them as worth dignity, as worth liberty, and to be granted dignity from the state, and not to have state power used against them. That's the Western conception of society, stemming back to basically St. Augustine. It starts with Jesus, but St. Augustine really codifies so many different things in his book, A City of God, and somewhat Confessions. But I'm off on a tangent, right? So let's bring it back to the news, right? You fundamentally either think that the shooter that works for ICE is not a human being and you have empathy for the woman that's killed, or the woman that killed was a deranged monster who tried to kill one of your valiant heroes. Like that seems to be the camps that we broke it down into, as opposed to thinking from a human perspective, which is, I shouldn't be executing things the way that they're executing. He violated police. He shouldn't have gotten out of his car to stop her. He shouldn't have stood in front of the car against police procedure. No major police department in the country would have thought that that was a good move or have trained that way. You've got ICE agents who have almost no training. You also have put an officer in a position who had a similar incident where he had I'm shaky on the details, but he had like a traumatic experience in the course of duty before, and then was put back out in the field, which is also a no-no. So he's extra sensitive to certain threats in certain situations. And then you've got a woman who is being approached by two ICE officers who she has been conditioned to think are going to harm her, correctly, it turns out. And they're telling her to get out of her car, the same organization that points guns at people for filming them. So she's not crazy for trying to want to flee the scene and not be detained by these people, given all that they do, how they act, the lack of accountability in terms of this policing department. Not a policing department, but that's what they're trying to do, apparently. She's looking at the officer walking up, and clearly her head is not looking at the man who's in front of the car. He's kind of in a blind spot, so she takes off to flee. He shoots. The third bullet kills her. These people went into this situation without seeing each other as human beings, and then our reaction to it is to strip them of their humanity as well. And my argument is that this is a function of government. This is how government works, right? And so I wrote and responded to the guy that wrote this to me. And this is what I wrote. So I want to read it to you. I'll try to make it sound like I'm not reading, but we'll see. Essentially, there are two ways to look at government. And I think that both have some merit, which is a controversial statement for a libertarian to make, that this first one has some merit, but I definitely think that. Government is a force. So if you're like Barack Obama, you're progressive, you tend to think government is a force for positive change where we all band together to collectively achieve goals, enforce norms, assert right and wrong. Progressives on the left, progressives on the right, like the MAGA movement, Trump, they see it as a force for moral good, where their vision of the common good can come to fruition. Now, that's different than the libertarian conception, which is that the state begins with those good intentions often, but eventually becomes corrupting. Government, at its core, is a monopoly on violence. And if you look at the different sectors of the state, go back to sphere sovereignty and how society is made up of these different spheres and they all kind of bump into each other, like family, educational institutions, the legal system, the government, the military, right? Like they all sort of have a piece, or you can break it down into three different sectors, which is business, nonprofits, or the charity space, and government. And so that's kind of the three sector: the compassion space, the profit space, and the the coercive state. Ultimately, government is a monopoly on violence. It's fundamentally different than business and markets or nonprofits and non-government organizations, families, schools, because government can force you to do things that a business or a nonprofit or an individual cannot, right? So there are things I can't walk into your house, put a gun to your head, and the government can if they have a warrant, unless they're ICE. So that's why progressives want to use government to enact their vision of morality. It's easier than persuading others that their vision of society is more beneficial. Persuasion takes way longer, and sometimes it doesn't work, and people don't obey. So let's just go right for the force because we are losing and we need to start winning and we need to go right into force. So government doesn't ask for permission. It demands obedience. And I think we've seen that over the last 10 years especially, and this is not a statement on Trump. This is just going through COVID, going through the MAGA years. As a libertarian, we've seen it rig markets, it jails opponents, it violates bodily autonomy without any consequences. And because of the nature of government, it attracts personalities that are more likely to steal, defraud, and control. And over time, it becomes more and more immoral. And it seduces a population into supporting the state due to our tribal nature just wired into our brains. And America is fundamentally different than other countries. It was the first nation founded on the second vision, where every individual could and would, over time, become free and have the autonomy to live out their vision of flourishing. It was not founded with every person having the full liberty and dignity due to them by virtue of being created in the image of God, but it did plant that seed. It allowed it to happen over a few generations. It would have been nice if we could have founded the country and not had slavery and women having the vote and so on and so forth, right? It wasn't politically possible at the time because of, in my opinion, the forces of evil. But it did make it possible through decentralizing power through a system of checks and balances and Republican government. And my theory is that if the state exists, it has to be small and local. It has to be something that you can go and interact with, reasonably run for office, raise money, participate in the government, sit down and get a coffee with the person that has the most control over your life. And when we start to build up these big central states like we have in the federal government, then you start to see it's just way easier to cause chaos than if you have strong local government. I would love it if we could get all these Democratic governors on the 10th Amendment train, right? Like Ron DeSantis and Republican governors brilliantly used the 10th Amendment and, federal government, basically saying the states created the federal government. We're going to push back on your powers through the COVID era and against Biden. Like, why aren't the Democrats doing more of that? Why isn't Tim Walz arresting the guy that shot the ICE agent? If he's so morally outraged, arrest the guy for murder, start arresting some ICE agents, right? So it's that's what Republican governors would have done and tried to do during COVID. And I think we really saw through COVID that progressives gave up on a liberal democratic capitalist system of government. And I know this really chaps the ass of my Democratic friends in the comments to this. It was, it's just the Republicans that are bad. It's like you violated bodily autonomy by trying to force every American to take a vaccine. It's whether you think that's right or not, that's a fundamentally un-American impulse. The state, we are not property of the state. I'm not owned by the government of Indianapolis, Indiana, or the United States. I'm an autonomous individual that gets to make choices. And I think that because of that, this is the Democrats just think that they never do anything wrong, and then they can't figure out why they keep losing. But what you're seeing now is a pushback to what happened during COVID and why so many people voted for Trump. And I know it doesn't make any sense because I'm the only libertarian podcaster that didn't lose their mind and has continued to say that Donald Trump was terrible for the economy. He's the one who put Fauci in charge. He's the one who sent everybody a little card that says Donald Trump's COVID response and had press conferences about shutting down. And the next day, Republican governors used him as the cover to shut down and defaulted to the COVID regime led by Anthony Fauci, and the CDC director that he put in place. And Donald Trump's the person who wrote 3 stimulus bills and passed 2 of them and signed them and was mad in the third one that the checks weren't big enough. Nancy Pelosi wanted to spend less money than Donald Trump. So like every inflationary problem that you have that you're still dealing with was inaugurated by Donald Trump. So he sort of got away with all that, but that's neither here nor there. Democrats got the blame and they were ready to go further. And so just sort of push people further into the Trump camp. And so Republicans have decided that they're going to give up on liberal democratic capitalism and the rules-based international order, and they've become power worshipers too. And it's not made the nation more Christian. We're not in a freer society and a more Christian nation today than we were a year ago. In fact, I think it's destroyed the witness of the American church, and it's corrupted the souls of so many people who cry out, Lord. And it's because we have slowly been drifting through the Trump years in both directions towards less liberty and more power by any means necessary. And this is an important thing. So I basically lifted this next paragraph from Marshall Fritz. And so I want to play something for you because I'll let him speak since we could do this here. See the video on the YouTube version of this. Look up Chris Spangle on YouTube and you can find it there. Marshall Fritz, this is on the libertarianism.org YouTube channel. And it's an introduction to libertarianism with Marshall Fritz. I'll put it in the show notes. But I think this is the best introduction to libertarianism in 50 minutes. And you can find it in this podcast feed, the Liberty Explained podcast feed. You can hear it there. I may bump it up in the feed just so it's in the last couple episodes for you. I think this is the best introduction to libertarianism ever. And Marshall Fritz founded the world's smallest political quiz. He took the Nolan chart that David Nolan, who founded the Libertarian Party, who created that diamond that you've seen maybe. If you look up the world's smallest political quiz, he wrote that out, turned it into a little quiz that you could take, printed them out, formed the Advocates for Self-Government, of which I worked there in 2013 as a marketing guy for them. And still around, great organization. They have lots of resources, but they had the Operation Politically Homeless kit forever. And Marshall put this kit together with these 10 questions 5 economic, 5 personal freedom questions, and then you plotted your chart, and oh, lo and behold, almost everyone ended up being a libertarian. So if you were having an outreach booth at a county fair, people would walk by with see the stickers, and it's overwhelmingly libertarian, and so you'd be curious about this term that you had never heard, and then the person could have a conversation with you. And so Marshall drove around the country and had hangers printed up that said Marshall slept here and slept in people's houses, and introduced this kit and chart to people across the country, and has helped millions of people at this point learn the word libertarian, and for some of them become libertarian. And so this is the last time he gave this presentation at some point in the 80s. I don't think it says here. So 1981. Okay. And in this video, you can hear a guy named Chris Roofer, who is a major donor to the Advocates for Self-Government. And it was sort of funny because this moment that you hear with Chris Roofer that sort of helped morph him into a libertarian, 2013, he was basically asking me to recreate this moment for him, and still is, according to some friends that I know that work there. But I just think it's a brilliant presentation of what government is, and the extension of morality when it comes to government. So let's play it.
John, if someone were to come into your house, he's wearing a ski mask, he's carrying a shotgun, gets the drop on you, and he robs you of a bunch of your stuff. In your opinion, is there something wrong with that? Yeah, yeah, sure. He says, yeah, that's an easy one. How many of us would agree with John? That's obvious. He's saying, yeah, okay, good. All but one. Good group. Okay, over here. You introduced yourself, but you didn't get a name badge just yet. Edgel. 2 people come into your home. Again, they're wearing the ski mask to get the drop on you and all of that sort of stuff. They're cleaning out some of your stuff. You've got this great big built-in television set, and there's this argument that ensues, do they have enough time to get the TV set out of there? Okay. And you bring up that your brother-in-law, a highway patrolman, is due over any minute right, to watch the game. That might be best that there isn't time. And they sort of decide to vote on it. And it turns out the vote is 2-1. And they take the TV set. Edgel, does the process of taking your stuff become morally okay if you're allowed to vote on it? If they employ democratic principles and allow you to vote? No. How many of us think that if you get to vote on it, it's okay if people take your stuff? Only if you have a big family. Oh, dear. Let's see here. Martha, 3 of them come into your house. This time they're not even wearing, they're very brazen now. They're not wearing ski masks. They're dressed in suits and all that sort of thing. You can see that they're carrying guns. And they prepared a list of things that they want you to give them, including your Mercedes. But one of them comments, he says, Martha, young, delightful people like you should be in an exercise program. And while we are going to take your Mercedes, we're going to give you this nice Schwinn. And we encourage you to ride to work and ride to play and whatever. And so they leave and all. Is it okay if someone takes your Mercedes as long as you get something, some return on your investment? You got the Schwinn out of it. Is it okay now? Not a good return, but does the morality of their taking your car change because they left you something behind? You got something good out of it. You got the Schwinn. Did the morality of the theft change because you got something? No. How many of us agree with Martha that the morality did not change? Okay, good. One sort of last question, picking out someone. Bill, there you are. Hi. Took off his name badge and everything, but thinking he could trick me. But that's okay. I couldn't read it from this distance anyway. They didn't use the big pen. He's not a true libertarian. He likes to put on a name badge. The rest of us have to be practically coerced into it. So good for you, Bill. 4 of them come into your shop. Same thing with the Mercedes and the list and all this kind of a stuff. But they do one more thing. Bill, they're going to not only give you a Schwinn, but they're going to give a Schwinn to a poor person down in Paraguay who needs a Schwinn in order for her to get to work and all and support her family. And let's say a couple of things here. One, you have not only a generic belief in value in helping disadvantaged people, but you have a very specific burden on your heart for the people of Paraguay. You lived down there as a kid. Your mom was the ambassador. You went back in the Peace Corps, and you've got this great sense for the people of Paraguay. Bill, is it morally okay for someone to take your Mercedes if they do something that you consider good with some of the proceeds? Morally okay. That does not become morally okay, in your opinion. How many of us agree with Bill that even though they're doing something sort of nice that we approve of, it doesn't become the morality of it doesn't change? All right. Let's see, what are we up to? 4. Chris, what if we had 14 in the group? Would it be okay then? No? Richard, 40? Philip, 400? Linda, 4,000? 4 million, Phyllis? 104 million. Hey, watch it, guys. You're wrecking the carpet. 104 million people? Yeah, John saying, I don't know. It's a lot of people to crowd in the house. The question is, how many people does it take in a gang of robbers to somehow transform the immorality of robbery, somehow transform that into the alleged morality of taxation? Fairly simple question. I'll repeat it. How many people does it take in a gang of robbers to transform the immorality of robbery into the alleged morality of taxation?
Gosh, wouldn't it be nice to go back to a time when taxation was our biggest concern? I haven't talked about taxes in like 5 years. I just love Marshall Fritz, a former teacher, if you can't tell. Funny, personable, great presentation. And he goes on to talk about basically extending the golden rule. And so I don't know if Marshall was an anarchist or not, right? I don't know that he ever argued for zero government because you have to be morally perfect. But I do think that this kind of aspires to a certain moral direction. And I think this is what people miss about politics, or they may not think about politics, or maybe they do think about politics. And I don't know. Politics ultimately is an extension of your morality. If your aunt stops talking to you because of your political beliefs, it's because they have seen your moral code, and their moral code and their moral code and your moral code cannot coexist. And so therefore they have a breaking point. I'm not the type of person who thinks that you should never disconnect from people over politics. I do think you should strive not to, but I do buy the argument that politics is a reflection of your own moral code. And for me, in my house, we follow Jesus Christ and his example in every possible way. Certainly do a terrible job of this. I got a message from a guy who told me a rather unfortunate thing about he saw my mother doing something very unfortunate, and he was a stranger. I don't know who this guy was. He just messaged me to make me feel bad because he had saw something that I posted on Facebook that he disagreed with and wanted to tell me what my mother was up to. She was not up to that. I don't know that she's ever met a donkey, but it is a reflection of the fact that the fact that I couldn't narrow it down to which shit post that came from probably says that I'm not nailing it. It's obedience in a long direction. It's not instantaneous transformation, right? And when it comes to my political philosophy, the more I become obedient to Jesus and the more I understand about his teachings and his character, the less in favor I become of the two parties and politics in general. I think the fundamental example of Jesus's ministry, like there are some things that I think you can point out. For one, Jesus didn't come to coerce, right? He didn't come to force people to do anything. When he was teaching, he didn't give commands. He taught through stories, and those stories required individual responses, not even cultural responses. He didn't say, this town has to do this or else, and it's very individual based. He issued invitations to follow him, and when people refused to do that, he turned and walked away rather than responding with violence. The young ruler, he didn't beat up because he didn't follow him. He just wept. I mean, he was crushed that this man had seen the truth and didn't follow him. He didn't use violence. He was put on trial as an innocent man while a crowd lied about him. When he's standing in front of Pontius Pilate and Matthew, the crowd is outside making up lies about him. And instead of having the need to tell them who he was and what he was doing and how you're wrong, and he just didn't say anything. He refused to respond. He refused to respond with force. He just stood there. I mean, said what he had to say. He said his piece, and then what happened happened. There wasn't a mandatory draft into Christ's army in AD 30 to overthrow Herod or Tiberius. He explicitly rejected political power in the third temptation in the desert. And when threatened with violence, he declined to respond in kind, as shown in his command to Peter in the garden. When they come to arrest Jesus and Peter cuts off an ear, he doesn't pick up a sword and start fighting too. He rebukes Peter and then heals the man. Over and over and over and over and over, Jesus chose suffering love over coercive rule, allowing persuasion through self-giving rather than domination. Now, if we use him as our guide, we could measure how corrupting modern politics is for individuals and why the state must be as small and as local as possible. It's a sole protection system. None of that means that Jesus isn't Lord and that he isn't in charge and that he isn't the king. And in the next life, we all will have to answer for what we did in this life. But I think in terms of a model of how we react and how we want our politics to be laid out, persuasion over coercion is about as good as we're going to get. Thank you for joining me on this episode. We appreciate it. We're excited to get together on Saturday. Me and the boys are going to get together and talk about some more of this. I thank you for joining me, and we'll talk to you again soon here on The Chris Spangle Show.